Howdy, folks. Welcome to the Other Side Chronicles. I'm your host, Stephen Scheurich, and I live right here in the heart of the weird and wonderful little settlement known as Burien, Washington. But I was born and raised in the shadows of the Ozark Mountains of Missouri and Arkansas, where the hills hold secrets and the nights are filled with whispers. Pull up your rocking chair and pour yourself a strong cup of whatever brew might comfort you. Then lean in close, because these stories we're telling don't wait for the light of day. Welcome to the Other Side Chronicles. And so it begins, y'all. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Other Side Chronicles. This is your host, Stephen. Welcome back to all my kin and all my folks out there. Good to have you back. We have a great show today lined up for you. It's going to be, I am so exciting to have my friends Ross and June here. Ross, Allison, and June Nixon joining me from Aghost. Aghost in the from right here in the homeland from Seattle. Um, and um, how I found out about you all was doing meaning that I do this show from the Highline Heritage Museum, that you all actually came here and did an investigation, which if you had tuned into our very first episode, we had Nancy, the director of the museum, on the show talking about that investigation. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, along with some of the other things that they have going on. But first of all, I want to introduce Ross, who is the founder. And I'm just going to read a little bit what I have here of all the things that Ross does. He's a paranormal investigator. He's an author, a media host, a lecturer, a teacher, and a tour guide. So obviously that keeps you busy. June, I, I know you've been involved with Ghost for I think from the start. Is that correct? From
Well,
that's the
I
start?
got involved with the Ghost in 2012, so
Okay.
not from the start, but
Okay.
yeah.
And it's been going on out about 10. How many years has y'all been doing this?
Ghost is going on 25 years.
Whoa,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
had
we
Hmm.
no
start
idea.
yeah,
That's
we started back
wild.
in 2000. I've been in the field for over 30 years now.
So June, what's your principal duties with the
I'm a vice president and client coordinator of a
okay?
Ghost. So yes, I kind of field a lot of the phone calls, set up the investigations, do a lot of things like that, and just help out
She's the
where I
glue that
can.
keeps us together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I'm
important to
sticky.
have that. Believe me, I totally understand. So, so tell me a little bit about a ghost. What is a ghost? What do you
Well,
all do?
well, GHOST stands for the Advanced Ghost Hunters of Seattle-Tacoma. We are a organization that basically tries to validate or even debunk situations that have to do with paranormal, or I should say, when it comes to ghostly paranormal. I know the paranormal aspect can, be a very wide window there, but we do focus our attention on ghosts. And so we just travel the world investigating some of the most haunted places that you can imagine.
Well, I can imagine. My imagination is pretty big, so I'm guessing that I can. So, uh, there was a quote I saw that you said, and you said, and tell me, I think I'm quoting you, Ross, is you can't use the paranormal to prove the paranormal. Is that a good, was that correct?
Yes,
Is that your
yes.
quote? What does that mean?
Well, unfortunately, ghost hunting, it can be very diverse. You have a lot of people in the paranormal field that will like to utilize, Ouija boards to try and communicate with the dead and prove ghosts, or, pendulums,
Mhm.
or even psychic abilities. As much as I keep an open mind and believe in the psychic elements, there are far too many elements, there are far too many individuals that try to just use that as proof to the paranormal.
Right.
Our team really does focus on more science. We do want to have the data to back up our findings. We're not afraid of the ones and zeros. We want to utilize more equipment to show that there is something happening here. We're not a paranormal team that says, yes, ghosts exist and you need to believe. We just try to open people's minds to the idea that there's something out there. We are experiencing things we can't explain. What is it? We're not sure yet. We're still trying to collect that information. Does it fall in the line of the popular belief of ghosts? Sure. But we just are trying to validate a lot of these experiences.
Right, June. You got to tell me who just joined us here. Who is it?
Well, this is my my little ghost hunter puppy,
The little
Fauna.
monster, that's what
My
it
little
is.
monster sweetheart doggy. Yes.
Oh, well, welcome, welcome. I didn't
She's
know.
a sweetheart to her, but don't
Yeah.
get her around anybody else.
She's very protective, let's
Well,
just say.
that should definitely that'll draw in some more people to the show for sure. Having a dog on there, there's no doubt.
What do
So,
you mean? What dog? I don't see a dog.
right. So,
It's a ghost dog.
so I'm guessing you get lots of calls, and do you? And I'm sure you can't like do a full investigation on all of them. So say I call in, and I'll just give you a true. This is true. Say I call in and I say I live in an apartment that has it's a new apartment. It's not old. It doesn't have any historical significance. Matter of fact, I was the very first. This is a true story. I'm the only person that's ever lived in this apartment. Only been there about a year, and I had a situation where, and this sounds crazy. I know, who am I talking to here?
Yeah, who are you talking to?
I got to remember, slap my face a little bit. So I have a cabinet that has three tiers, and the highest tier I can't even begin to reach, right? It's ladder. I don't even put anything in there. The bottom shelf holds snacks. The only two people that ever live in my apartment is me and my son. And I came home one day and all the snacks that had been on the bottom shelf had been moved to the top shelf. And I'm just going to give you a little background. I do have paranormal things have happened to me all my life at different times, but I still thought it was my 17-year-old son that did it. But he hadn't been there, and he only comes once in a while. So when he got there, I said, "Why did you move the snacks up on?" And he said, "I didn't." Or you looked at me like, gave me that 17-year-old look like, "What are you talking about?" And so I say I call in, and I gave you that story, and I think I have what's going on. There's something going on. What would you do? What would you say?
Well, I'll leave this for June because this is part of
Okay. Yeah,
her wheel.
right.
Well, I talked to them a little bit more and kind of make sure that so their story kind of stays the same. And then we usually schedule a walkthrough, and this is done in the daytime most of the time. So we can go there, take pictures of the area, kind of some of the hot spots. We have a team maybe of three or four people who go in and take more pictures inside, do basic readings like carbon monoxide readings, electromagnetic field readings, temperature readings. What other readings? I was trying to think. We do a lot of the basic readings and just kind of get a feel for the place.
And
And
it sets up a baseline as
yes.
well.
And then, too, if we get some really strange readings, we're like, okay, something strange
Yeah.
is going on.
Could it be carbon monoxide?
Yeah.
A lot of it is, we're trying to see if we can also debunk it.
Yes.
This is
Seeing what
one
it
of the
is.
things if this is really worth our time and energy. If we
Right.
can go in and, debunk your story and, just try to bring, more sanity and say, okay, unfortunately, this is not a ghost. Because unfortunately, a lot of clients do want to blame everything on the paranormal when a lot of the
Mhm.
stuff can be explained.
Right.
Well,
And then sometimes you do get some mentally ill people
yeah,
that just
mentally
well,
challenged.
yes.
Yes.
I can imagine, right? Yep. Hmm.
But
I think
I
I'm
mean,
that about half the time too. So
would you stop that?
for sure.
But we do ask a lot of questions and we ask them in different ways too, just to kind of see if their story still, stands up to it. I mean, like one woman, even in her bedroom, she kept saying that she was seeing a shadow person standing at her bed at night sometimes, and she was getting really bad headaches. We go in her room and they're doing some construction, some rewiring, and we hold the electromagnetic field detector, EMF, reader up to the light source, even when the light's not on, and it is off the charts.
Mm.
And when you have something that high, it can actually cause hallucinations, headaches, just all sorts of health problems.
Right.
And so that's one thing we brought to her attention and say, I think you might want to get this fixed. And that's the only place that they were seeing, this paranormal activity. That's the only place that they were having weird feelings and headaches. And so yeah.
And
And
that was very similar to another case too, where we always try to read the bed, a lot of times because that's where a lot of times they have their experiences is when they're laying
Mhm.
in bed or and we actually ran some of our equipment and they had an old radio clock next to their bed. It was huge, it was old, something like from the 70s, early 70s,
Mm-hmm.
and it put off so much EMF that, we brought that to attention. So she got rid of it. And ever since she got rid of it, nothing had ever
Oh,
happened since.
interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to my story because I hate to talk about me very much, but it's my
Go
show.
right
So
ahead. Yes.
anyway, so okay, so the other couple that, like I said, this new apartment, this happened a couple times. The cat tree, which is heavy, the cats aren't moving it. I came home and it was in the middle of the living room twice. Again, blamed my son. Seriously don't think any of these things he did because he says he's not a jokester. He's not somebody that pull places I've lived, other places I've lived, just different things kind of similar to that have happened to me. I never feel afraid or there's anything malevolent, around me, but those things happen. Like what's your thoughts on something like that? Because it doesn't feel like it's the place, right? I mean, it's definitely not a haunted apartment, but it was built a year and a half ago,
Well,
you know.
sometimes apartments can be haunted.
Okay.
I don't rule that out.
Okay.
It
You
is
don't
a
know.
harder environment to investigate because you don't have full control of your environment. When you have people living above you, below you, to left of you, to right of you, they're causing noises.
Mm.
When they're going up the stairs, you'll hear it in your apartments. When they drop something, you hear it in your apartments. Even when they're cooking, you'll smell it in your apartments. Or
Mhm.
doing other things in their apartments can affect the environment around you.
Mm.
So it is harder to validate paranormal activity when you are dealing with an apartment situation, but apartments can be haunted.
Mhm.
Um, but there's one thing that we always try to look into when you're dealing with a paranormal activity is, there's always an attachment to a person, place, or thing. So the first thing that I would question is maybe there's an attachment to you, especially if this is something you've experienced for a long time and it seems to have followed you throughout your life.
Mhm.
Now, this could also be psychic phenomena. You may have something that you're not aware of, that you haven't tapped into. And sometimes psychic phenomena can be mistaken as paranormal ghost phenomena.
Mhm.
Um, you see things that other people can't see. Well, it may not be a ghost, it could be something you're just seeing. And that could be a psychic projection, things like that. So, it's something that we would have to learn a little bit more about you. So as
Right.
June was saying, it'd be more intense questions and following up about you, your history. A lot of times when it comes to psychic phenomena, it's something that, has been within the family.
Mhm.
It's passed
Mhm.
down from generation to generation. So you
Wow.
may have other family members that have had similar experiences.
Mhm.
So those are some of the other things that we'd have to look into. So yeah, it's a long process. A
Yeah.
lot of people think though it can be done overnight and we'd solve the mystery. No. Trying to figure out what's going on with some of these locations and people, it can be a long process and returning multiple times
Sure.
to try and validate.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes me jump. It makes me think about the museum a little bit, and your investigation here, because this was it wasn't like an old building, an old, but you have all these things, right, in the museum. You have all these
Right.
things that hold energy or
Like I said, attachment
yeah.
to things as well.
So is
Yeah.
that when something like this museum, I'm and can you talk a little more about kind of what about this investigation here in the museum and what you came out with? Your thoughts?
Um, I remember a couple interesting. It's been a while since we've done that investigation. I was trying to refresh my memory as it was with June. Me and June were talking about it. And I remember the one thing that really stood out for me is, yeah, and Nancy can validate a lot of the experiences that she's had and other staff have
Mhm.
had there. But a lot of times to us, they're stories. When people tell us, oh, we've had all these, interesting experiences, we want to take their word for it, but we have to try and validate those experiences. And the one thing that I can definitely validate during that investigation is the walking
Mhm.
upstairs on the roof. You'll hear somebody clear as day, heavy boots, walking around up there. And it was enough that I heard it, and I actually went up to the roof
Mhm.
Mhm.
to try and see if I could, figure out what was causing that noise. And I couldn't. So for me, that is one experience that really did stand out was the walking. I know there was a couple times we have what we call these motion sensitive balls that will actually light up and due to vibration or slight movements. And we had those go off a few times during the
Right.
investigation.
Mhm.
It was really strange. We also had an electromagnetic field. I have this little lantern. It's kind of pretty. It lights up if something, kind of gets close to it. Actually, with more, I'd say EMF kind of gets close to it or anything like that. Any energy, any strong energy gets close to it, it'll go off. And it was almost like something was answering some yes and no questions. It's like, is there somebody near me? And all of a sudden it would go all the way up. And then you'd say something else. And it was almost like something was answering it. It was over there by the little school desk, in that on kind of that side, which was interesting.
Mhm.
Seemed like it was.
Mhm. So if you came back to the museum, I know you talked about that, what would you do? What would be the reason to come back? And just,
Well, another reason to come back is to try and validate even our own personal experiences that we have there.
Mhm.
See if you can reproduce it. Um, See if you can actually try to debunk the experiences as well.
Mhm.
So for me, having that personal experience of hearing the walking up on the roof, I would probably put some equipment up on the roof if hopefully it's a nice day
Mhm.
and see if we can actually validate any vibrations or anything that might correlate with the walking that you can hear sometimes.
So when you talked earlier about attaching something to me, things can also be attached to objects. Was that
Yes,
true?
yes. Attachment to a person, place, or thing.
So I know there's a bench in the museum
Mhm.
that was from an old school, and they used to punish the kids and make them sit on that old bench, and that's always
Yes.
an object every time I walk by that bench. It's like,
Do you know, actually, with that bench, we had some really strange readings coming off of it.
really.
I remember David Press, he was actually over there and he was getting these really strange, high electromagnetic field readings. And then I came over with mine and mine did it. And then we came back again and there was nothing. So it was really interesting. If it kind of if it was steady there, we could look for some wiring, we could look for some, electrical outlets, something there. but there really wasn't anything around that area, and then it wasn't consistent. So that was interesting too. Think about all the energy that's coming off of that bench
Hmm.
by the principal's office.
Yeah.
I know Ross remembers those days.
Are you saying I was a problem child?
Oh my God.
Maybe.
My ears are deformed from all the time those nuns like
Oh,
grabbed me by the ears and
oh,
took me to
oh
the office. So
my.
yeah,
Oh my.
I'm a
Oh,
recovering Catholic for sure.
oh, I'm so sorry.
So since we're the show comes, we're in Burien and the show is around from around this area. Can you give me a good story of one of your investigations here locally? Tell me one of your best local stories.
Ooh, so
Oh,
many
I know, I'm
local.
trying to think.
Mm,
Um,
Some
Gosh,
maybe some place where somebody would be familiar with the place or the.
I really can't think of anything offhand.
oh my, let's see. Local.
Okay, no, I'm definitely stumping. I'm definitely stumping here. So because
Well,
Give
I
it's one
give
of
us a
those things.
second. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, so many.
it's all
so
right. And
we we
you can come
easily.
back to it. You can come back to it because one of the things that where I've been to and I had definitely had some experiences there, and I saw it was on your list of places that you all have been to is the Stanley Hotel,
Oh yeah.
Oh
which
yeah,
Hmm.
obviously a lot of people know from The Shining and Stephen King, and I used to live in Colorado
Oh,
and have
nice.
been there multiple times, but you all did an investigation and went to the Stanley, correct?
yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I was one of the first back in the day that we had hosted an event there, and we had some pretty interesting experiences. I remember, hearing my name being called when no one was there. There was an episode of Ghost Hunters where they were down in the basement area and they heard a woman laugh. And during our investigation, we were in the exact same area and we heard the exact same thing. And we actually captured it on a recording as well.
Yeah,
So that was a pretty interesting experience.
yeah, it's a cool place. I know there. I don't know if you're familiar with this hotel, but I'm from southern Missouri and northern Arkansas. That's where all my folks come from, and there's a hotel in Eureka Springs, Arkansas.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you've all been there yet, but it has
Yes.
that kind of Stanley, and I'm trying to remember the name of the hotel.
Oh, it's
Um,
oh, I know what you're talking about. We that
I've been there many times too, but it
But
has
like
that kind of
Mystic or something.
Stanley Hotel feeling to it. It sits right up on top of, looks out over the town.
I think that's
oh
one that
my.
June's been to that I haven't been to.
Yes, it's the oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know. Right.
It'll come to me like
Me
3 o'clock in
too.
the
And as
morning.
soon as I,
Isn't it something Springs or something like that? Or
no, no,
no?
there's a lot of springs there. Like,
There,
Yeah.
yeah, um,
Oh my gosh.
it's
Yeah,
like
there
the
is the
Stanley, kind
springs.
of like it sounds. I mean, it has that. I don't know. As soon as the show ends, I'll remember.
Yeah, it was also on Ghost Hunters.
Oh,
They did an episode on in that too, and that's supposedly where they saw that Civil War soldier in the reflection of one of the lockers downstairs.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
it's really a cool place. Eureka Springs is just a really cool
It's
little
beautiful,
town.
isn't
I
it?
love it.
It's just
Yeah,
an amazing town. Yeah, it's an
exactly.
artist community and so
Hmm.
much going on. It's a cool place. All right, so um, give me a story where to this day it still kind of keeps you up at night. Like you're still scratching your head, like what the hell was that? And you just maybe this is very unique. Can you just give me one of your good ones?
Well, I know you wanted me to bring this up because you were familiar with this location as well.
You're going to St.
This
Louis University, I bet.
St. Louis University, yes.
All right, right.
So I was doing a lecture at St. Louis University. I've been lecturing for, gosh, going on 20 years, a little over 20 years now. And I actually, when I do my lectures, I take the students on a ghost hunt as well. So I'll do my hour lecture on ghost hunting, then we go out and walk around the campus doing a ghost hunt. And one of the things I do is I give some of the students some of the basic equipment so they can follow me around and do their own mini ghost hunt. And I, at the time, this was, gosh, going on, It had to have been about 20 years or, maybe a little longer. It was back when I first started doing the lecture tour, and was invited to St. Louis University, and and I'm very familiar with the case, the Exorcist case. This is actually where it took place, but I did not at the time put the two together. And so when they brought me to the campus, we're kind of walking around, they take me to this building right next to this church. Come to find out, the church had owned this building. All right, now this is the church that was actually involved in the Exorcist case, the one that inspired the movie The Exorcist. And the story is actually about a little boy, not a little girl, named Linda
Right.
Blair.
Right.
So as they're taking me on a tour of the campus and I guide them on a ghost hunt, all the stories start to come out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, I am very familiar with this case. So they take me to the building that's right next to the church. And at the time when the church had owned this building, they basically had nuns living in the building. They used to teach Sunday school up there, but they've now sold the building to the campus, and now the campus, does a bunch of, classrooms and meeting rooms and everything are there. But at the time when they first took me up there, um, they took me to the fourth floor. Now, when we got to the fourth floor, I was surprised that it was completely run down. I mean, there's holes everywhere, graffiti everywhere, and it was a massive area too. And I'm thinking, gosh, campus this size, you'd think they would utilize this space. And they start to tell me that they don't utilize the space because they've had too many problems. And when they say problems, they're referring to paranormal problems. And I'm going, okay, this is interesting. So we start to walk around the building, and I'm just, kind of, walking them through the investigation. And they take me to one room where a story is that a nun had committed suicide in this room. And then we take me to all the different, classrooms. There's old classrooms up there, and you can still see the chalkboards up on the walls. And we're going through all these different rooms, and we walk into this one room, or I actually am the first to walk into the room. And right when I walked into the room, I heard this crunch underneath my feet. And I looked down and I realized I'd stepped on a dead bird. Now, this is not unusual for me. I've been in a lot of abandoned places, and sometimes animals get trapped in the places and they die. So I really didn't think much of it, but I kicked it over to the side so that no one else would step on it.
Mhm.
But then when I shone my light through the rest of the room, it was just filled with dozens and dozens of dead birds. And I had already been through most of the fourth floor. I had not come across any dead animals, but this one room is just filled with all these dead birds. Now, what made this interesting is the fact that security had removed all the doors on the fourth floor. And the reason for this is they've had so many problems with students sneaking up there to scare each other that it's just made it easier for them to make their rounds and harder for students to hide. So I realized that these birds had access to the whole fourth floor.
So why did they
Why?
pick this one room?
Exactly. Well, I'm standing in the middle of this room, and I realize I'm the only one standing in the room. All the students are still standing in the hallway. They're all too afraid to walk into the room. And so I asked them, I said, what's going on? And they bring it to my attention that this is the room that the boy had stayed in. Now, if you're not too familiar with the case, the story was that the church believed they could not perform a full exorcism on the boy in the church because they believed that this could possibly kill him. So what they had done is they had performed multiple exorcisms on this boy at various secret locations. So after they perform an exorcism, then they move him to another location. And the belief was because they believe it's not just one, it's many that is possessing this child. And so they believe that when each time they do an exorcism, something's leaving. And so preventing it from getting back into the boy, they move him to another location. So I'm now standing alone in this room filled with all these dead birds, realizing that an exorcism had been performed in this room.
Mhm.
So yeah, creep factor's gone up a bit.
Yeah.
So I finally coaxed, some of the students to come into the room, and it was a small room. We couldn't fit the whole group, but at least I got about, 8 students in the room with me, and they have their equipment, and we're in this room, just trying to read the room, and we're in the room for less than 5 minutes when all of a sudden all the equipment starts to go off at the very exact same time. I mean, you could start to feel the temperature starting to drop in the room. The EMF detector's going off like crazy. We can't figure out what's causing the EMF readings. The compass is spinning around and around and around, and it will not stop. And I'm like, oh my God, this is really happening. And so I got to document this. I got to prove that this is happening. And of course, a picture is not going to do that. So luckily, my camera also shoots an infrared video. So I switch my camera over to the video. I start filming everything that's going on, trying to document the equipment, trying to document, the students as well, showing that this is all happening. And then it starts to slow down a little bit. And I realized before it completely stops, I want to try for EVP. Now, if anybody's not familiar with EVP, that stands for electronic voice phenomena. And these are those voices that appear on our recorders that are not supposed to be there. You don't hear it at the time it's being recorded, but you do hear it in the playback. So I decided to try for EVP, and I start asking questions into the air. And I happen to ask the question, can you tell me whose room this is? Now there's about 12 seconds of silence. Then I start to hear crying. And I turn around and I realize a couple of the female students have started to cry because they're so terrified being in this room. So I realize, okay, they're uncomfortable. I have to admit, I'm a little uncomfortable too. I don't have my normal ghost hunting team. This is just a bunch of inexperienced college students following me around. So I realized, for me, it's always about safety. So I decided, you know what? Let's go ahead and move on to another location. My goal was hopefully after the investigation, I could go back and do my own little investigation. Well, I didn't get a chance to go back and do my own little investigation. But when I finally got home after my lecture tour, I finally started going through the videos that I collected at all these campuses. And I got to that one video. And I got to the part in the video where I asked, can you tell me whose room this is? To my surprise, I captured two responses. Now I'm going to edit this because I don't want to offend anybody, but it basically says, F you, it's mine. So that was a pretty interesting experience. And it gets better.
I'm already like
Mhm.
the hairs are all standing up right
Yeah.
now. So keep going.
So years go by. I didn't get, they had a strict policy that they can't have a presenter come back the next year. They have to give it enough time before they can invite somebody back. So that time had passed, had been a couple years, and they finally were able to ask me to come back and do another one. Now, since then, they had remodeled the fourth floor. They turned it up into big meeting rooms and offices up there. And so I was talking to the student staff, who's in charge of the event, and they were interviewing me, wanting to, get back into that one room. And I was trying to recall where the room is because now it's gone. It's been part of the big remodel. So I was a little, trying to just recall from memory where it was, and so we could try and get access to that space and try to figure out exactly where it was on the new floor plan. Well, come to find out, they didn't touch it. They left that space completely alone and blocked off from the rest of the remodel. So the only way to get up to that room is up this old staircase. It's blocked off. There's a little staircase that goes up to that space, and then there's just a few rooms left in that area that has not been touched with the remodel. So I was like excited. I'm like, wow, it's still there. And the reason why they have not touched it is because they've had, again, all these problems that they've had with that particular space. I mean, there are stories of security guards used to use it to store their bikes. And when they come back, they'd find the chains ripped off their bikes, or the handlebars bent around, or the seat moved around. So there's just been so many problems up there, they just wanted to leave it alone. So now I'm coming back for my second time to this university and do my lecture and ghost hunt.
Is it a real quick? Is it religious university? Is it is it still, is it run by religious
That I don't
organization?
know. I
Yeah, I was
don't
just
know.
curious. Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Um, so we have the chance to go back. We did our, ghost hunts. Now this time, we didn't have anything crazy happen with all the students there, but I was granted access that after the lecture and ghost hunt, I could go back and do my own ghost hunt. So now after, the little ghost hunt with the students, I had the opportunity to go back. I go up into the room. I do a little, EVP session, but then I decide, you know what, I want to leave my equipment here overnight. And they granted me access. They told me who to contact in the morning when I was ready to pack up and leave and head off to the next college. So I left my equipment up there, and I come back the next morning to pick up my equipment, and everything is still in the same place. So it's good. And now the nice thing about it is my recorder was still going. So I didn't miss anything. So I finally got home after my lecture tour and I started going over that recording that I had done. Sure enough, in the recording, you can hear me, going up that creaky old staircase to set up my equipment. You hear me do my little investigation, and then you hear me leave. All right. You can clearly hear me leaving, walking down the staircase and the door shutting. After that, you can hear somebody walking up there. You can hear a door open and close. You can hear talking. But then all of a sudden, there's this sound that almost sounds like a train coming into the depot, that little cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching noise.
Mm.
And it's getting, louder and louder. And as it gets louder and louder, you can hear a woman screaming, "Let me out, let me out, let me out." And almost like she's banging on a door, and then it just stops. Then I'd say probably a few hours later, you hear me come into the building, go up the staircase, and collect my equipment. So that was a pretty amazing experience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
One of my favorite stories I make you tell over and over and over again.
All right,
I
June,
don't
give
I don't always get to tell that second
that,
part though.
that's,
Yeah, no, you
that's,
don't. You
yeah, I mean
don't.
that
That's pretty cool.
I I think that's of all and I love, I'm a big, huge horror movie fan and
Me
love
too.
any kind of paranormal story, but something about that when you bring that satanic devil kind of stuff into the picture with human beings, and this is the part that I think creeps me out more than scares me more than anything. I think when that part of it, I don't know. I think maybe it has something to do with how I was brought up too. Some of that stuff. But no, that was a good. Okay, June, I'm not going to let you off the hook.
Oh,
Give, give me a
well, I
story.
don't have a story as good as Ross's. I have several,
Yeah, I
several
hate to
different,
follow that one, right? That's
yeah, exactly. I think one of the stories that kind of freaked me out the most was at the old Montana State Prison in Deer Lodge, Montana. We were investigating that place one time, and I was in the old administrative building. And I was walking with my friend Matt, and all the lights are off. It's the middle of the night, and we're going down this hallway, and it all these twists and turns in this hallway, and it's pitch black in there. We just have our little flashlights to lead the way. And all of a sudden, I felt like I rubbed up against something, and I looked down on the ground, and there's nothing there. And I was like, "Wow, that's weird." It's like, "What is that?" And yeah, I'm one of these really pretty calm people. I don't get overly upset unless I see a mouse or a bat's running, flying at my face.
I can
And then,
testify to
yeah,
that.
and then that's a whole other story. But, with paranormal things, I'm very level-headed. I want to see what's going on, what the deal is. And all of a sudden, I got overcome with panic. And I just felt it, from the bottom of my toes, and it just went up. And I was like, oh my God, Matt. I said, we've got to get out of here. We've got to get out of here now. And I'm just like panicked and I'm looking around, everything else. And when I was turned the other way, because I felt like somebody was right behind me, but when I was turned the other way, he freaked out because he's never heard me do that before. And he just left. So I was all by myself. And I was just like, oh my God. And I felt like somebody was right at my neck. And so I turned another way and I went the long way around all these hallways and everything. And I'm going faster and faster. And I feel like something's behind me. And I'm still holding my recorder. And I finally get out to the main area. And I was like, I see Matt, and he's sitting there, and he was like a little nervous himself. And he was like, what was wrong with you? And I said, oh my God, Matt, I don't know what that was. I have no idea what that was. And on the recorder, if you hear it later, you hear, it's me. Loud as everything, right into the recorder. And yeah, that gave me goosebumps. And it kind of validated that, there was something strange going on there. But yeah, that was one time that I felt panic. And I don't, know, I mean, there were a lot of violent episodes in the administrative building. There was a full-blown riot, and the deputy warden was killed. And they had several other incidents like that. But yeah, that was one of the creepiest things for me personally. And we've had some other things, like at the Walker Ames house in Port Gamble, Washington. Where I saw a shadow not connected to a person. And I have to say that's one of the more defining moments for me, to believe that I started to really believe that there was something paranormal out there. Because when I first got into this, I completely did not believe. I was like, I've lost so many family members, everything like this, and they haven't come to me.
Right.
I find that hard to believe that
Well, I
there
don't
is
know. I
something
mean,
out
I can
there.
argue that one, June.
But that was afterwards. At first, when I was first like getting into the paranormal, and then going to Port Gamble, Washington, and seeing the shadow. And when I was like, who is that standing in the hallway? And I start walking towards it, and it comes to me and disappears. And it's like, what was that? But yeah.
Port Campbell seems like it'd be a really good town for
Oh,
paranormal stuff.
it's great. And almost every single shop has a story of paranormal activity.
Yeah.
They love to tell their stories. So yeah, it's
Ross, have you
awesome.
ever started to go in somewhere and just, I mean, St. Louis University seems kind of like that, but have you ever gone anywhere and said, nope, nope?
Well, I can't call myself a ghost hunter and not be willing to be in the heat of the kitchen. You know, it's always surprising to me when I watch ghost hunting shows, which I stopped watching a long time ago, when they sit
Yes.
there and say, give us a sign, and the door slams behind them and they scream and run.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, didn't you ask for a sign?
Right.
So it's one of those things that, even though I've had some pretty interesting experiences, even with St. Louis University, I'd still go back in a heartbeat. I would be more likely to want somebody else with me, for,
Like
credibility
me.
reasons, even, to witness, or even to sacrifice June if I need to.
Oh yeah.
I think after hearing her story, we should sacrifice Matt.
Yeah, there
Yes.
we
Poor
go.
Matt. He's disappeared. We don't know where he is now. Well,
But
that's
no,
also like Chillingham Castle. We had some weird experiences in the UK, and in Chillingham Castle, supposed to be one of the most haunted castles in the United Kingdom. And yeah, we had some cool, interesting things happen in the woods there, past the
well, I'll
witching
let you
hour.
continue, June, since you started the story.
No, I was just saying that, with someplace like that, I'm really want to go back there.
Now, I
Um,
think even if our experience may be considered negative, I think it just draws us more to want to go back
yeah.
and try to validate that experience.
And see, what was that?
I
What
do
was going
believe that
on?
I do believe you can experience negative energy. I don't try to label things. because I try to be more scientific in my approach. But it's a situation where I definitely would want to continue to document those experiences. You'd have to be more careful in your approach, but I definitely feel that if we're trying to validate these, experiences, we need to be able to toughen up and be able to walk into the fire at times.
Yeah. So based on this is, I'm sure you get asked this question, and I'm sure it's a hard question to answer, but based on everything you've seen and heard, what's like when it comes to ghosts and poltergeists, whatever word you want to attach it all to, what do you think? I mean, where does it give you more like, do you feel more like there's something after we die? What's your kind of just maybe more on the philosophy side about this, about how you feel based on what you've seen and heard and experienced?
Well, I definitely feel there's something to this. When I was filming Parasense, my documentary, um, one of the things that we were able to do for the first time in history is track phenomena. So we were able to see something come from nowhere, approach the subject, and then leave. So we were able to track that phenomena. So that shows that there's something there. Something can be read by the equipment. I always point out the fact that there is no such thing as a ghost meter. There is no meter out there that validates that you're experiencing a ghost.
I
We
think there's
don't
even
have an
in there. I think there's even an app now,
app.
right? Like an
Yeah,
Yeah,
app.
yeah.
they're all ridiculous, all right? It's
Right.
all
For
mostly all
entertainment
entertainment.
Right.
purposes.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to develop a tool that tells you you have a ghost, you have to know what a ghost is and what a ghost is made of. We don't have that information yet.
Mm-mm.
We're still just, touching the surface as to what we might be experiencing. The problem with ghost hunting, it's all about being at the right place, right time. So there's more misses than there is ever, collecting that bit of information to validate that there's something there. So that's a lot of time and energy that we have to put into a lot of these locations to hopefully validate one little experience. So as to what it is, to go back to answer your question, I don't know. We 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 know that there is an intelligent factor when we can go into places and you can ask a question and you get a direct response. So there's something there. Something can respond to you. Something can react to the environment, move objects that are in the environment. So in that case, we do know that we are dealing with an intelligent factor. That is where we call it a ghost. But then there's also elements that we call residual hauntings, where it's just trapped memories or an event that just plays itself out over and over and over again. It doesn't really interact with the environment. But we find that that can easily be produced by the living as well. It doesn't have to be something from the past or from the distant past, I should say. It could be just something from the recent past. I've always brought up the fact that we don't know how some of this gets recorded in the environment, but it can. So, a situation, if you're going through a very stressful point in your life and you're pacing up and down the hallway, just trying to figure out what your next step is going to be. What are you going to do next? How are you going to get through this? You don't know. And so you're producing all this emotional energy as you're contemplating your next move. And somehow that gets recorded into the environment. So you may have moved on. You've moved on, moved to another place. Things are better for you in life. It's great. But now the new people that moved into this house that you were living in, that you were having that experience, now for some reason at a certain time at night, they'll hear somebody pacing up and down the hallway
Mm.
and it gets labeled a ghost. But it's really that emotional experience that you had somehow got recorded into the environment. Same thing with suicides. someone could be in a room, commit suicide. And, of course, now somebody else moves into this room, especially if they are very sensitive to their environment.
Mhm.
They can pick up on that emotion, that depression. And in some cases, they become depressed themselves,
Mhm.
almost to the point where they may commit suicide.
Mhm.
And so now you have two different cases of suicide that have happened in this room. You can't blame it on a ghost, but you can say that there is some sort of energy that is collected in these environments that somehow we as individuals who may be sensitive to those environments can pick up on that thing.
Mm.
And that's where some of that psychic element can come into play as well.
Yeah. So I hope the people that move into my apartment after I leave don't have their snacks moved around on them, but you
Yeah,
never know, right?
interesting.
So
You may have somebody living in the attic too.
Yeah, you might want to get some cameras in there just to be on the safe side. Have
I
yeah,
you
don't know
seen
if you've
those
ever seen
videos?
those videos where like homeless people sneak into people's houses and live in their attics and their closets and they don't even know it for years.
no, I've
And
definitely heard
like,
about it for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way for someone to do that in my apartment, but I'm somebody living in the cupboard or something, who
But
knows?
see, as ghost hunters, we have to look into that.
Yes.
I mean, somebody's moving my vanilla wafers around.
Yeah.
So we're running out of time. It's been awesome having you both on. Um, I would definitely like if, talk to Nancy and have you all back at the museum and
I would love to.
we could do a live show
Oh,
here,
Oh, that would be awesome.
which would be awesome.
Oh, I just love Nancy. She
Yeah,
is just
oh my God,
amazing.
she's one
I
of the
love
sweetest
her.
human beings I
Yes.
know. But yeah, we could do a live show. That would be incredible. And but I would love to have you all back sometime. I mean, I just felt like we barely touched. I
Oh,
mean,
we could talk for hours about this. We
there's
love it.
there's no doubt. I mean, okay, one last thing because I'm a huge horror movie fan. What's your favorite? Do you all have,
Oh,
if you had to pick one, do you have a favorite?
mine
um,
has always been the entity or the changeling when it comes to
yeah.
ghosts.
I was gonna say Changeling is at the top of my list.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't watched
Not
that.
the
I'm writing this
yeah,
down because I haven't watched it for a
the
while.
George C. Scott one, not the other
Oh,
one.
that's right. There's another one called the
But
changeling.
that wasn't about ghosts.
Yeah.
George C. Scott's and the Changeling?
Yeah,
Oh
Yeah.
wow.
he's in
Okay.
Changeling. Yeah, it's one of my absolute favorites. And I also love the old school, all the old school horror
Oh, me
and
too.
Hammer movies and things like that.
Another
I
really
love
good one
those.
is The Woman in Black.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah.
love
I
the Women in
enjoy The
Black.
Woman in
It's
Yeah.
Black.
so nice and creepy. It has that creep factor that's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
nice and
All right,
fog.
cool. All right. We'll post that. Um, well, thank you. Yeah, thank you all so much. I really
Well,
appreciate it
thank you.
and look
Oh,
forward
this
to
was
seeing
fun.
you all again soon. And I appreciate you coming on.
Well,
Anytime.
thank you.
Yeah.